Hi, Vicky.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your time today. I want to ask you some questions that I prepare with South Korean artists. So you so generously share your rich lecture slides and workshop materials with us. So thanks to your knowledge sharing, we have been really enjoying learning about AR. So could you say hello to our workshop participants and introduce yourself briefly with your words?
Hi, my name is Vicky McArthur. I'm an associate professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. And I'm also the program director for the Bachelor of Media Production and Design program, which is a very new program that focuses on all aspects of digital storytelling. So I'm just really happy to be here to talk about my materials with you and a little bit about augmented reality.
Thank you, Vicky. Let me ask you the first questions. We've learned the definition and concept of AR, but some of participants were surprised by the extended concept of AR. These days, we usually have an idea of AR, which is the overlay of the images using mobile devices or headsets. So what is augmented reality in your definitions?
It's really interesting because this is exactly the reason why I like teaching augmented reality is because with any other medium like VR, games, anything else, when I'm teaching a class, people always bring these like preconceived notions to class. They have a lot of experience with these media. They see them a lot. They're very confident in what they represent. Augmented reality is still quite new compared to a lot of these other mediums. But it's also kind of nebulous. Like it can be a lot of different things. It's literally any time you mix virtual and the real in a way that's contextually relevant, right? So not just mixed reality where there's some virtual things in space, but they're registered to that space. They're sitting on a surface. They're attached to something. They're extending my knowledge of something. And that's really what I think augmented reality is to me. It's this idea of being able to take the digital and overlay some aspect of story, knowledge, information, or expression on top of the real world.
But it seems like your definition is very closely connected to mixed reality. So do you think that is sort of, it's not really divided concept or is because of the more vast spectrum?
I think the one difference between augmented reality and mixed reality is obviously that like augmented reality has to be augmenting something or like attached to something or registered to something. So there needs to be something in the real world that's anchoring it either through meaning or through physicality or some sort of object. Whereas mixed reality can be like putting anything digital in the space. So there's definitely a very thin line there as to what, sorry, what is augmented reality versus mixed reality. And I think that's another issue that we tend to come across when working with even experienced AR developers. Sometimes will blur the lines and say, oh, I'm still doing augmented reality. But it's really getting more into mixed reality territory.
All right, thanks. There are second questions. So as you know, I don't know this is Korean thing, but or also North American things, the metaverse became a very trendy concept due to the Facebook, right? So do you think AR is directly related to metaverse? But what is metaverse exactly?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it has become quite a buzzword and it might be more popular in South Korea right now. But it's still very much spoken over here. It was picked up quite a lot by the news as soon as Mark Zuckerberg started talking about his vision for the metaverse and how Facebook was moving into that sort of domain. It's funny because I mean the term's been around for decades with Snow Crash and Ready Player One. It was really first coined kind of in those earlier like fictional science fiction media. And then I think probably the closest first version we had of that, although it wasn't virtual reality, was Second Life, right? Second Life is kind of this social virtual world where you could literally be anything you wanted to be, and it spanned so many different servers and had so much sort of going on at its height in sort of like the 2003, 2004 time. I think academia kind of kept that alive after that, mostly for research. But the idea of the metaverse has been around, basically this idea of these sort of social virtual spaces, which can have varying levels of gamification in them. So some can have sort of game-like entities or even games within the virtual world. But this idea of sort of connecting over VR and being able to be more social over VR is really exciting, but also kind of concerning, right? Because we can see a lot of like negative things can come out of online interaction, lots of sort of like bad actors and things like that too. So there's a lot, I think, that even though Facebook's obviously very excited to go into this area, I think there's a lot that they haven't really considered with regard to the types of things they're going to want to build into this environment to make it a truly safe and fun place for everyone to explore. With the idea of AR, I mean, once Metaverse kind of finds its footing and becomes maybe an established place where we do start interacting more in the same way that we have on social media. I mean, I could see AR kind of helping leak aspects of the metaverse into our physical spaces, so we're not always maybe having to hop in. Sometimes maybe parts of it hop out to interact with us. So I could see that as potentially being an extension, but I think metaverse has a lot of growing up to do first.
Thank you so much. Because you have a like background in game study as well, so you kind of have a bit of like a clear understanding of metaverse, I guess. Thank you so much. All right, and the next questions. As you know, many of our workshop participants have a music background, and I know you also have a music background. You just play clarinet, right? Because AR has been more focused on visual elements, but you have emphasized the significance of audio and sort of music in AR. So could you explain more about that?
Yeah, so it's funny because with my music background, I feel actually kind of guilty that I haven't always been practicing what I preach, because I do talk in my classes about, how AR has become a predominantly visual medium, and that audio is often overlooked. And then we spend so much time trying to get the visual stuff working that sometimes we don't have time for a lot of audio. So it feels kind of like I'm a little bit guilty too. I think a lot of that stems from the idea that like a lot of the first things they were trying to sort out with AR was like the visual components, like the machine vision aspects, being able to track markers, and then being able to track more sophisticated markers to the point we are now, where any highly detailed image or even like the face or other things can actually be recognized by the computer to have some kind of overlay aspect. But there is a lot to do with audio that I think can really help to extend our experiences with AR. I'm actually really impressed with how much Lens Studios actually tried to implement with AR audio. Sorry. They've done so much trying to get like spatial audio added, marker tracked audio effects, even audio transformations of, so you notice, for example, maybe if you're using Snapchat as a user, when it changes your voice, right? When it makes you like have a cute little high pitched voice when you're transformed into a bunny, we can actually add those same types of effects in the Lens Studio side too. So they have really started to explore that a lot more. But I think we can still do a lot more, both within my class, but also as a broader community, to really push the boundaries of audio in augmented reality. But the other issue they have too is like they do offer some kind of tutorial type files, or at least documentation, but they don't always keep it up to date, and they don't usually go into enough depth on a lot of these things. So if you look up, for example, like spatial audio, they'll have this really nice documentation about what it means technically, how it's implemented technically, like breaking it down, but not at the level that a novice user needs. Like sometimes we just really want to be able to walk through step by step and see how we can try it. And then we can play with those steps, right, to make it our own. And that's often what's missing in a lot of their documentation. So I think even though they're building these components in, they haven't quite made them accessible to novice users with regard to just like, how do I safely explore this? How do I know if I've broken it, or if I've done it right, or if I'm close but not quite there? So I think there's a lot more that could be done there in supporting novice users as they build more of these audio components into the software.
I see. So we are using Lens Studio in this workshop, but as you know, not many people do not use Snapchat. So are there any good AR templates or tools on Instagram or Facebook? Or why is Lens Studios kind of leading the AR tools?
So as far as I know, there aren't any comparable tools for Instagram or Facebook. Now that could change at any time. As you know, Facebook plunging headfirst into the metaverse, they might also end up developing tools for like XR content creation. It's really interesting the way Lens Studio is leading in the AR tools. Like, as you know, industry standard AR, if we were in like an AR development studio, we'd probably be using something more like Unity or Euphoria as opposed to Lens Studio. What makes Lens Studio so great, of course, is that it's fairly novice friendly. Like, you can implement some really cool things without a lot of programming in the background. But what I discovered when I started using Lens Studio for my courses, because I've also downloaded Snapchat, but just for testing things. I don't think I've ever made a public post on Snapchat in the years that I've had it. Is that there's this other side to it where they seem to be really supporting creatives and trying to identify as a platform that supports augmented reality artists. They do a lot of stuff for their artistic community. They promote their work using the spectacles. They usually will give spectacles away to their creatives and influencers to sort of promote what the platform is capable of. So they really are, I think, beyond the whole like Snapchat app side of the business, trying to really promote themselves as a company that supports augmented reality. And the fact that they've resisted to being purchased by Facebook so strongly, I think also sort of proves how they're trying to sort of create this unique identity for their platform based on that.
So they try to be independent from other social media platform, right? Okay, so the like spectacle is the goggles, AR like glasses they are creating right now, or it's already out there?
They have 3 versions of them that have been out for a while that are different from the current model. So the previous ones are just like regular sunglasses that you can wear, but they take pictures and then they import them to Snapchat. So you can basically take, it's like a hands-free camera, not quite the same quality as like a GoPro or something like that. But they're sort of marketed to influencers who are leading such exciting lives that we, their followers, want to experience their lives from their perspective. So they can take little videos that sort of are from sort of their first person view. In the most recent version, which they don't seem to be selling as of yet, they're only giving away to influencers through competitions, like to show you have this really big portfolio of AR works that you've created in Lens Studio, and then maybe they will send you some, are actually getting closer to an HMD that will show AR on the lenses. Like the previous ones were just sunglasses with a built-in camera, but these ones will actually be, you can view your 3D content in the real world, almost like HoloLens. So they're really starting to sort of move towards being that kind of augmented reality company.
Okay, so we have a few more bit of technical questions, but we mainly learned on image-based marker tracking AR. A few participants asked interesting questions about different types of markers. So could you explain a bit more about GPS-based AR? So can GPS information functions as a specific marker? Or then can we adjust the parameter of AR components such as distance based on the values of GPS information?
So GPS can be used in augmented reality, but there's a bit of a caveat in that it's not super precise. And maybe cell phones are probably much, much better in Korea. But anyone who's sort of tried walking with GPS directions will find sometimes it'll be wrong about which side of the street you're on, or it might take a moment to catch up with you if you've like walked under a bridge or through a building or something like that. So GPS generally is good for finding location, but you can't really rely on its precision with regard to like small space AR or very, very precise location-based AR. So usually the workaround for that, if you don't use something like a visual image tracker, is something like an iBeacon or some sort of like RFID tag or some kind of like a smaller Bluetooth-based, like low Bluetooth emitter sort of device that can provide much, much more location-based precision. So especially if you're doing, say, like an audio guided tour in an indoor space, you would rely on something like the Apple iBeacon as opposed to GPS for much, much more precise location-based tracking. So that could be really good, especially for like a guided audio tours or spatial audio experiment or something like that, where you wanted to sort of deposit sounds in specific spaces.
So yeah, so then one other question is that one musician participant shared an interesting idea. So she wants to use an audio sources as a marker, then a certain images could come out. So which is kind of the opposite what we've done in our tutorials. So is this kind of implementation will be possible? So I've seen an audio analyzer function in Lens Studio, but I'm not sure how it works. And also seems like we need a bit of like scripting, or this can be work in Unity if you can develop some things.
I imagine it's probably possible. It's not something I've personally experimented with, but I know the little that I've seen about that particular affordance of the software, is I've seen it implemented almost in the same way like audio visualization, like when you think about like earlier audio players that were used like 20 or 30 years ago that would kind of play like a visualization image that went along with the music. So I've seen it used in that kind of a way where like it'll make objects get bigger and smaller with like a change in volume, or it'll have sort of different objects light up depending on like pitch or like tone and things like that. So I've seen it used, and I know I've seen people implement things like where a visualization will change based on like a level of sound that comes in. So like if you speak and you have like double horns, they maybe get bigger when it hears voice and when it doesn't hear voice. So I've seen that type of implementation. I don't know for sure if it's sophisticated enough to detect a very specific sound. And I say that because in the audio tutorial that we made with the different train station sounds, there's two of the markers actually have one letter in common. It has the character Shin, which is like new. And so sometimes Lens Studio, recording it to Snapchat, will sometimes confuse the two and play each other's audio. So because it can sometimes confuse visual markers, I'm not sure how sophisticated it is at detecting a very specific sound. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but definitely something to look into, but not to spend too much time on in case it's not working.
This is the last questions. So now our participants will start making their own projects. And could you give them any tips on this?
So at this point, you've spent quite a bit of time learning how to develop something in Lens Studio. I think before you take the steps with your own project, moving away from the software to paper or physical prototyping is definitely the best step. And the reason for that is because it takes you away from being tempted to duplicate what you've learned or map your own visual or audio elements onto the things you've learned to do, and to really be creative and think about, if I could do anything, what would that be? And so I think moving away from the software to ideate and then coming back to it to lean on us for implementation is really the best step, because I know you all already create such amazing works. And I'm actually very excited to see what you decide to design in augmented reality.
네.